collaboration, security, data center, and networking. This is IT in the Bay.
All right, so welcome back. It's IT in the Bay, and I am here with my man, Chris Marshall.
Hello. Hey, Sean.
Yeah, hello. Hello to you, sir. And today we're talking about SD-WAN and wherever else it goes.
Okay, that sounds good. It's exciting.
On the old podcast. So I guess, when we get into it or when we start chatting about it, I think about when the first time I met Chris Marshall. I think you've got a pretty good story about that. We met as I wasn't a customer. I was a consultant and you were a customer. And I think that was the first time we met, right?
I believe so. Yeah, that would have been back in 2007 now. Yes, when I first came to America. I'm obviously, for those of you who can probably hear me, I'm from London originally. Mm-hmm. And moved out here and I was working for a law firm in San Francisco and you came in and made our phones work.
Yeah. Well, I think before I could even make the phones work, we had a little technical shootout, didn't we?
Oh,
that's what I was talking about. I didn't even realize it was a technical shootout.
That was right. Yeah. No, that was So triple CCIE. I was just a lowly CCNA at that point. Not a voice guy, but I was. I've always loved QoS, and I think we were talking DSCP markings and COS markings, and you said that it was an 802.1Q marking, and I corrected you and said no, that's actually 802.1P, which I believe is the field within the 802.1Q header. So yeah, that was a big win for me. You didn't know it, but you were absolutely shamed.
I was mortified. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It was great.
I'm living off that story still to this day. I still get beers off it. It's great.
So that's awesome. So now you've got your CCIE. Tell me a little bit about when you obviously studied to get your CCIE. You took some time to do that. What was that experience like?
It was fun. No, it was grueling. That wasn't grueling. It was great. Actually, it was. They always say it's not about the result. It's about the journey.
Oh, like that.
I was fortunate. I started to try and and I guess a lot of people have this as well, where you have a full-time job and you're trying to study as well. That was tough for me. So I was fortunate in the sense that my wife, we kind of had a conversation and we agreed that if I could take 6 months out, so that's what I did. I kind of just made getting the CCIE my full-time job. So yeah, it took 6 months. Failed the first time spectacularly. They always say it's the most expensive lunch you'll have, and it certainly was for me. I knew within the first 2 hours I'd failed. So that was kind of a tough day. And then finally got it on the second attempt. But wow, what a relief! Yeah.
Yeah, and that experience, I think, unless you go through it, it's hard to know what that experience is like, taking that exam and the pressure you put on yourself, and the not sleeping very well the night before. At least I didn't sleep very well the night before the test.
No, and I made a mistake. I mean, I guess, and this has all changed recently, right? But when I took the exam, it was in San Jose, and I was living up here in the North Bay, out in Walnut Creek. And I decided, I think I'd spent so much money on the exam. I just figured, I'll just drive down there in the morning. Yeah, should have got the hotel closer and just So that was just to add to my stress. The San Jose traffic was my start to the day.
Yeah, and I remember, I think it's been so long, but it was like 8 a.m. start or I did do the hotel thing, and I was glad I did. Got there super early. I was so nervous. I think I woke up at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and just got a coffee and just sat there and in the parking lot going, looking down and going, okay, 7:30, should I go? And you start seeing all these other geeks rolling up to the door, building 10. And I think it was building 10, right?
Oh,
9 or 9, 10? Anyway.
Did you pass first time?
I wasn't going to say that, but I did pass the first time.
What a high achiever. Nice.
Maybe I got lucky. Maybe I overstudied.
That's probably it, yeah.
It was probably easier when I did it.
Yours was the 2-day, right?
2-day, yeah. So
it got harder later, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, basically the first day was just easy stuff, So yeah, so CCIE, you got the routing and switching. Any thoughts about would you ever do any other certs like CCIE level or any of those? Have those ever crossed your mind? Or you're like, nah.
No, I mean, I feel I'm always studying and always sort of.
I know you are.
It's, yeah, so I'm kind of at the moment, I'm sort of toying with the idea of the IE security. I've kind of covered a lot of that track. And obviously, now a lot of the cloud certifications,
Yeah.
Amazon have come out with a few. So I think that that's worth looking at as and, I don't know, like, Python and Linux. It seems like this whole full network stack. I mean, it's never ending. But no, I mean, I think, again, getting back to that sort of old analogy that it's not the result, it's the journey. So sometimes just, studying, the certification gives you a path. So that's kind of the motivation. But yeah, obviously, just learning the stuff can be very rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know you've always been passionate about learning new technology, and not only learning the technology, but understanding it at a pretty low level, like deep level understanding.
I try to. I think that's the best way. I mean, to retain information for me is, yeah, that's the way it sticks. If I can, because you can, read through a document, a configuration guide, a deployment guide. But I like to test that. If we have the luxury of having some equipment here and kind of running it through its paces and just making sure it does what it says it should do. So if that means checking the RFC, maybe opening a few packet captures just to look at those headers and what's going on, then that really, again, that solidifies that information for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I was talking to Dominic, and I know you said you listened to some of the podcasts we did with Tom.
Big fan, yeah.
Big fan. And we were talking about his blog series, and you two have a blog series around SD-WAN. What have you learned or thought about, or was it just because we forced you to write an SD-WAN blog? What tell me a little bit about the SD-WAN blog and kind of your thought process around it, or anything that comes to mind around it.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to sort of some breaking news here, and we can edit this out, I guess, a little bit. But I was chatting to Annie and Bridget earlier about this, but yeah, the SD-WAN lab is no more. So it's cloud hosted. Everyone, those controllers, and if you don't pay the bills, they blow them away.
Did we not pay the bill, or
no? There wasn't. We actually used it as part of a project I was working on. I think it had run its course, and I neglected to respond to Cisco, and they blew it away. But what we're talking about, and actually we had some comments on the blog about this. So what I'm proposing, if hopefully if we get the time to do it, is actually to set up a new lab, but actually deploy the controllers on premise. So we'll not something you see really in the wild. Like I say, most people go with the cloud hosted solution. But for home labs, and we had some questions about this is definitely the way to go, that we can, and I think to get that, again, that understanding of vManage and vSmart and vBond and what's going on. Because obviously, when you buy the cloud, it's all automated and deployed by Cisco. But to actually install it yourself, again, I think gives you that understanding of how those components really glue together.
Yeah. And as one thing I want to do before we get too deep onto the blog series and start talking about underlays and all the great stuff you're going to tell me about it. But just to back up, and why would anybody buy or even consider SD-WAN as a technology? Forget Cisco, forget the brand. Mm-hmm. Why would somebody do that? Why what's the big deal?
Initially, I think that the cost savings was one that, a lot of people spoke to. I'm not sure if that's so much the case now. I mean, I think that, it's kind of, it's really, I think visibility is going to be the big thing, right? It's that central kind of, it's that software defined, it's that management interface. It's that, like I say, it's that visibility into, having active circuits, directing traffic, reacting to brownouts. It's just stuff we never had before. I mean, it's kind of, we always, we relied on our service providers, and, we never really kept them in check, whether they're meeting their SLAs. Now we have that visibility. So I think, I was saying this to a customer the other day. I mean, a lot of people, well, again, probably want to edit this out. But,
we're not editing anything. It gets posted, man. We don't edit. We just write through.
Yeah, I think, when people are having bake-offs, you look at the sort of the magic quadrant at the moment for SD-WAN. Mm-hmm. Obviously Cisco's up there, Velo Cloud and Silver Peak are some of the big players. I mean, the honest answer is, I think that when you go from a non-SD-WAN environment to having SD-WAN, I don't think it matters which you're going to be better off. Your users are going to be better. Now, obviously, there are differences. There are different differentiators, and we can kind of talk deep about some of those. But generally, going to SD-WAN, you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoever you go with. But yeah, so it seems like a kind of a no-brainer, really. It's just, the security that it adds, particularly around the data plane. Before, you think about your traditional kind of VPNs and pre-shared keys and how manual that was, and with best intentions, we'll rotate those keys. It never really happens, and we end up having like a key that's shared amongst all of, it's that sort of the wild card key that everyone taps into. And yeah, so because certificates have always been a pain, and I think with SD-WAN they've kind of really automated that and taken some of that complexity. We don't need to have our own PKI and stuff like that. But yeah, so I guess that was kind of a long-winded answer, but
I like it. I like the long-winded answer. Makes me not have to do anything. It's great. Don't have to ask any more questions. So I wrote a blog nowhere near as popular as yours or Dom's. Before I jump in, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Dom. Do you know how many people viewed your blog?
I think it was around about 2 million.
A little bit less.
Oh, okay.
A little bit less. But very close.
Yeah.
It's a couple hundred a week.
Oh,
200 or 300 a week. Well, I think it's pretty good. I think my blog got two views, and one was me, and the other one was my mom.
Oh, I was going to say all those hits coming from London. I've got.
It could be the BBC following you.
The parents, they love SD-WAN.
They just keep. Well, it's unique visitors, so maybe you have a lot of family over there. But yeah, it's unique visitors per week is 200-ish, plus or minus.
Okay.
And that's on an individual blog, and I know you've done many in the series, so it just depends on the week. But hundreds are going to multiple. So I guess, close to maybe 800-900 views for the series.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I really enjoyed putting it together. I mean, like I say, I think we need to reboot and start again, maybe with the lab, like I say, with the on-prem. But yeah, for me, it was a learning experience. It doesn't really matter how many people, read it. It's great that people do, and hopefully they get some value for it. Certainly when I did my first project with SD-WAN, there was very little documentation out there. I mean, this is, when Viptela would have classes, and but that was the only way of really getting any kind of content. Obviously, there was no books, there was no design guides, there was no deployment guides. Yeah. So Cisco, obviously, we're starting to see some of that material appear, but still, there's no substitution for obviously getting your hands on the technology and really putting it through its paces.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so one of the things I said in my blog, I'm curious if you agree or disagree, which you can totally disagree.
I disagree.
I like that. Is I said I was basically making a discussion. I don't even know. Making a point of saying, what technology do you pick? Do you pick, or do you have a service provider provide you your SD-WAN, or do you build it yourself? And what are the pros and cons? And one of the things I think is if you have a service provider providing the control plane for your SD-WAN or controlling your entire SD-WAN, in my mind, that's kind of counterintuitive to the whole thought process of SD-WAN, in the sense that you would want to keep the control and then let your pick whatever service provider can provide the best connectivity where that particular site is. Would be a good way to go, and leveraging, and where I'm talking about internet circuits, but obviously you could still have an MPLS with a single provider. But that was my thought, is that if you're picking which way to go, buying the technology and doing it, or just going to a service provider and saying, hey, I'll check the box, give me the SD-WAN solution, and I'll have software-defined WAN. Do you have any opinion on that? What you think? You think it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think back to, well, I don't know if this is a good analogy or not really, but if you think back, BGP, having your own sort of provider independent prefixes and your own AS number versus, having like provider aggregatable addresses. So, the beauty with having your own address space was obviously that portability, right? I'm not tied to one provider. I mean, SD-WAN, obviously, it's transport agnostic, right? That's one of the big selling points. We can run it over any kind of IP connected network. Obviously, if you have a provider, supplying your control plane and management plane, as you said, then obviously that flexibility of moving, if you're not happy with them for whatever reason, then obviously that's it's very sticky to move away. Whereas if you maintain control yourself, obviously you have that flexibility to move around a little bit more. I guess the other thing I would say, I mean, the benefit with a provider obviously is that you're kind of handing off management to them. You're putting your trust in them. Maybe if you've got very lean IT staff and and they're going to do the deployment for you, that's great. Maybe you're not necessarily interested in what technology they use, because remember, these providers, they could be using Cisco SD-WAN, they could be using VeloCloud. I
Yeah.
guess it doesn't really matter to you. You're just paying for the SD-WAN service, and like I said, I think you'll be happy. But again, I think the conversation you're going to have with the provider is, how much access do I have? I mean, what dashboard? What does that look like? Because it may be that they give you read-only access to, in our case, vManage with Cisco, or it may be that they've built their own platform on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be, and chances are you won't get the full feature set because obviously they've operationalized SD-WAN. So that they've really got that they narrowed down what works for them to obviously manage this en masse. So maybe some of the cooler features, maybe some of the more corner cases, you won't have access to that. So yeah, those are the things to think about. So yeah, I guess that was my fault. So I wouldn't say one way or the other is better. You just got to have that. It depends.
Do you agree or do you not agree?
What was the question again?
So if I said provider or you own your own, what's better?
Own your own, obviously. Then.
Oh yes, okay, you agreed with me. That's great. Well, that's not, I guess, a fair question. But I guess it does depend. Like, it depends on what your IT staff's like. Do you have people that understand networking and routing and switching? Do you plan on adding multiple connectivity links? All of those things probably factor in. And so making a general statement's probably it's tough to do.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the providers, because again, that operationalizing things, it's very prescriptive, right? They're going to have a deployment plan.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to fit in line with that. So hopefully that works for you. I mean, I've certainly worked with a customer recently where it involved actually making a lot of changes to their network to fit into what the provider was expecting.
Yeah.
So that's again, I'll fall back to kind of Cisco's SD-WAN because that's probably what I'm most familiar with. But it's the flexibility that I haven't really come across a network where we've had to change the existing architecture too much. And if you have to, retrofit your environment to fit SD-WAN in, that can be painful. You have to think about some, those kind of costs to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my whole point in that whole blog series, that wasn't a series. I'm trying to step up to your level, but it was just a blog. But my whole point in that blog was really just to make the statement of control. And if you want control, why would you hand over the control of your WAN to a provider where SD-WAN is a freeing technology, freeing you from a particular circuit vendor or, taking a path as a primary and having a backup? You can use the software to dynamically select paths based on the best performance. So it's a freeing technology in that way. Why would you want to be locked down to a provider? And that was kind of my thought around it. So
yeah, no, and that makes sense. But again, it does depend. You've got to speak to the particular provider and just understand, what services they're offering, what visibility you have, can you make changes? Every time you add a subnet, do you have to phone up that provider and say, hey, we need you to manually add a static route to your, or do you run a dynamic routing protocol and then you kind of like, hope you guys don't mess up and start steering all my traffic the wrong way. So yeah, like any service provider, any kind of relationship, you've got to, hopefully, trust who you're working with and hopefully it fulfills your needs. But yeah, certainly, if I had a choice, I'd obviously say owning control because, that's, as a network engineer, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to play with some of those nerd knobs.
So you totally agree.
Well, I wouldn't say totally.
Okay, perfect. Well, all right. So let's we talked a little bit about SD-WAN, like as a high level. I'd love to hear kind of just give me SD-WAN, anything that you want to talk about around maybe starting with control plane and the underlay, anything that you want to go, just shoot something at me.
Okay.
Give me some SD-WAN. What do I need to? I'm deploying SD-WAN. What are some of the things, I guess, that customers ask you or that you hear?
I think once obviously they've seen the capabilities and they've made their choice on the platform, the next question is really about integration. How is this going to fit into my current environment? So I guess speaking some I guess kind of recent news is obviously that EIGRP is now supported in the Cisco SD-WAN offering. That was, for a lot of customers, certainly our customers, we see people running EIGRP. So that's kind of nice. We don't have to spin up an additional routing protocol now. But yeah, I mean, so that's really the question is that, diagramming that out, like looking at you can't really just away you go and start deploying SD-WAN. You've really got to look at what the current environment looks like. Once you've done that, you've got your integration plan. Hopefully, Hopefully their current sites are pretty standardized, and we can sort of templatize that a little bit where we're not making too many sort of corner cases. Then we roll out with the migration, and kind of generally that the order of that is getting our control plane and management nodes deployed. We mentioned that could be cloud hosted, that could be on premise, or it could even be hosted by maybe a managed service provider. As we said. Then we deploy our hubs. So these in SD-WAN sense, our hubs are really going to be our transit sites. This is kind of where SD-WAN talks to non-SD-WAN. This is our bridge. Obviously, we're not going to just convert all of our sites overnight. Generally, the hubs are going to be data centers today. So we would deploy them, and then obviously then you start deploying the branches.
You said something there that maybe people don't pick up on. If you're new to SD-WAN, you may not totally catch that when you say, "Hey, hub site." It's where your legacy network meets your new SD-WAN, because SD-WAN is an overlay technology on the underlay, which is can be internet, can be DMVPN. I guess DMVPN. No, that's probably not too accurate, but it could be. I mean, essentially, it's internet connectivity or private MPLS. Pick your flavor. And then what about I guess point to point? Would that be a valid path if you had a point to one site? Or
you could use it for like a data center interconnect. There could be reasons. Obviously, that would be a separate color. Only those two sites could speak on that.
Okay, yeah.
But you could leverage. I mean, between those two sites, certainly that's a valid path. So we should monitor it and look at it. But yeah, like I say, so when we talk about transit sites, it's really kind of as we bring our SD-WAN sites on. How do they speak to the sites that obviously haven't been migrated yet?
Right.
And really we have two options, and we talk about the hub and the transit site, and that's probably the easiest way of going about it. So it's kind of a meet me point when we bridge them together. So we're going more to a kind of a hub and spoke model at that point. Obviously the idea being that this is just a transitory state. The other option, which gets a little bit more complicated, but actually is on probably most of the deployments I've done, we've actually gone this path where we still want to maintain that direct connectivity. So I still want to access the underlay. So we've got an MPLS connection, for example. Obviously, when I'm speaking to SD-WAN sites, I want to speak over my SD-WAN. But if I'm speaking to an MPLS only site, I want to still leverage my MPLS underlay and speak directly there. So when we're doing that, we have to start leaking routes and tagging and making sure that we're obviously not creating loops for ourselves. So again, that would be something to talk about in the design phase of a project. Generally, if it's very few sites or it's a very aggressive rollout, then I would definitely lean towards having the hub transit site. If maybe we're not going to roll this out across the board, then we start looking at maybe doing some filtering and actually leveraging the underlay and the overlay.
I was always scared to do that. Anytime not that I did a lot of SD-WAN deployments. I'm more of a talk about it, not be about it kind of person, apparently.
Okay.
But when I've talked to people, I'm more like push it through the hub because I like that deterministic routing path and just less issues to troubleshoot. But
and geography would play a big part in that as well, right? And it
it's a good point.
It depends. I mean, you got to look at your applications. Now, generally, people are like, I must go point to point. When you actually look at kind of the real, if you start looking at service providers and where their physical cabling goes, sometimes a full mesh really is a hub and spoke because it would transit. But so it like everything, I guess it depends. But generally, for IT in the Bay, and that's kind of where we are. Obviously, bringing it back to that. A lot of our customers are in the Bay Area, so that geographically pretty close. It's not going to hurt to go through a hub site. Even for voice and video and things like that, we're not going to add too much latency.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good point. So if you had a couple of sites maybe overseas and you're running voice over it, coming back to the U.S. or to a hub site in the U.S. only to go back to another remote site for a voice communication, that could be detrimental to latency and the jitter and all the voice words that create issues.
I mean, again, you'd have to look at your particular application, but when we're talking about voice, I mean, I think the magic number is always 150 milliseconds. I think one way is what we talk about, and so to get up to that, you are going international. I mean, anywhere within the US, we're gonna, I hope, at least with our providers, but we should be way under that. So.
Way under, yeah, that's great. Okay, so when people are deploying SD-WAN, they think about the topology, in their migration strategy. What are some of the key benefits that you see, after post deployment, things that customers are realizing? You mentioned visibility is one, but is there anything specific that you've seen that you're like, wow, that's surprising, or that's cool, or this, I don't know, deploying it made us realize X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to that kind of holding the providers accountable. Certainly, I've had customers that have, come back and, when they set up their, application-aware routing policies, and we say, hey, prefer, MPLS, and maybe the MPLS has not been actually meeting those SLAs. So actually their voice and video traffic has been over the internet. They didn't even know it until they look in the dashboard. But obviously when you see that, you kind of start questioning, well, hey, maybe I should have a conversation with my MPLS provider to see what's going on, why we're seeing such packet loss, or, high latency, or maybe, it's just that, we thought we were paying for like a class of service, or we missed, we are under the assumption that, we had priority service and we weren't, tagging packets correctly or whatever. So,
Yeah.
I mean, before the SD-WAN, you don't know until a user complains and says like, hey, something's not right. And then, you kind of, break out the packet captures and start looking and sort of having arguments. But now you've really got real evidence to go back to the providers and say, hey, look, this is what we're seeing, what's going on.
Kind of like an archaic way of troubleshooting. Now you got some real modern age visibility into a network.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, because it's just, yes. So, that end to end kind of, you can really see what the provider's doing, even what the internet's doing, how it's, it's just, it's very interesting and very powerful, I guess, as well. That sort of, to make decisions on, capacity or moving providers, or, it's like I say, I think that's been, the big win for a lot of customers.
So service chaining, I'm thinking about that now.
Okay.
Service chaining, with SD-WAN, service chaining comes to mind. Like what's a?
You talking about service chaining or service insertion?
See, I don't even know. That's why I'm asking you. I need guidance and help. I don't know what I'm asking. You tell me. What am I asking?
Well,
I was thinking like a firewall. You want to hang a firewall in line. What did you say? Service insertion?
I probably call that service insertion. So I kind of,
Okay.
I mean, and sort of it's so service insertion. That again, something that just wasn't possible before, right? Is that the power, the traffic engine. We could do it. I mean, I guess you can kind of think of SD-WAN as kind of policy-based routing on steroids. We could do it. It'd be very manual before, but now to be able to say like, hey, when site A is talking to site C, I want it to go via, site B. To do that in the kind of the old world would have, taken a lot of static policies. It would have relied on prefixes. Now we're kind of, that sort of IP address agnostic. We can steer traffic based on application or any field within the IP packet header. That is not something that I've seen leveraged, to be honest with you, too heavily. But yeah, that is a capability there that, if we, again, because, if we have that central firewall or some sort of scrubbing engine, then we can direct traffic that way. Obviously, one of the things we would say with SD-WAN is we want to start looking at direct internet access. So, we haven't spoke about it, but some of the security features now that are available in these SD-WAN platforms that maybe we don't need to backhaul all of our traffic to a central site.
Yeah.
So that would be service insertion. That is one of again, the policy is really the powerful thing here, and that's kind of, I think that that what I've found in deploying this, I haven't come across an environment where I haven't been able to meet the customer. We've gone through designs, and sometimes we have to go back to the scratch our heads a little bit, but I haven't come up with a scenario yet where someone's asked for something where that's not possible. And the reason for that is because with the Cisco SD-WAN, they have that flexible policy, that we have access to. Yeah. Some of the other solutions are very prescriptive. So, you kind of Meraki-esque in a way that you have an interface, you have a checkbox, but if you want something outside of that checkbox, checked or unchecked, then, you're going to have to ask for a feature enhancement. Whereas when you're writing your own policies, obviously you have a lot of power there.
So it sounds like picking the platform, if you pick a more advanced platform like a Viptela solution, Silver Peak, a lot of those guys have policy-based routing control, and so that sounds like that's the big benefit in visibility and all those other things. Yeah,
I mean, but they'll generally have, like, when I say prescriptive, Silver Peak, for example, they'll call it business overlays is their terminology. Again, and they have about 3 or 4 different selections of kind of topologies and traffic steering. But if you want to do anything outside of what they're offering, then that's not possible.
Okay.
But yeah, so again, but with the Cisco solution, yeah, you definitely have full control. I mean, you can really get very creative with some of the policy languages. We haven't talked about there's application aware, the data policies, the control policies, the VPN membership policies. So there's a lot of stuff there and again, you don't have to learn this because out of the box it works. It's full mesh, and a lot of customers won't touch on the policies too heavily.
Mm-hmm.
But if we do, have a particular corner case, or you have something very specific to a particular customer need, then we have the tool in the toolbox to take care of that. I should just get back to you because you mentioned service chaining, and the reason
I was going to come back there as the last question. Like, does service chaining exist?
Well, it does, and the only reason it's fair to call that service chaining, but the only reason I differentiate is because when I hear service chaining, a lot of time I'm thinking about VNFs and virtual platforms, and actually chaining, so within a box kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of, so you look at something like the ENCS platform or I think it's the CSP platform that. Those that would be service chaining in my mind.
Okay, so it's more of virtual, a single box and putting in like a firewall, a WAN router, and an SD-WAN.
Yeah, in that case you'd be using something. So Cisco have their own hypervisor, NFV-IS, and you'd be manipulating that with something like DNA Center and saying, hey, I want my LAN traffic to hit my ISRV with its voice services, and then steer it to a firewall, and then finally steer it to a virtual, either a CSR or a vEdge cloud, and then send it out to the WAN.
Got it. All right. Well, I know we got people over here waving at us saying, "Hey, we're out of time.
This was fun.
We're out of time." I think we could. We could keep going. We could definitely keep going, and maybe get you back for another one.
I'd love to. Yeah, fantastic.
And if you want to hear more of Chris Marshall, check out the blog at lookingpoint.com and go to the blog. And, I know, Chris, you've been hearing the IT in the Bay thing. And are we going to give it a try? You know what I'm talking about? Where we do the little IT in the Bay at the same
time?
time?
A big fan, of course. I know, but I will say that when I heard IT in the Bay, I kind of envisaged us kind of throwing routers into the Bay. But
that's a good idea.
That's maybe the next episode. That's probably not good for the planet, though. So, but yeah, no, I'm game if you are.
Okay, so we do the 1, 2, 3, and then we'll say IT and we'll do it. Okay, right.
All right.
Wait, 1, 2, 3.
IT in the Bay.
Yeah. Oh, and we haven't had one bad IT in the Bay. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks for being here. If you want to check out more of stuff that we're doing, we got a little YouTube channel, LookingPoint. Just search LookingPoint. And we'll see you on the next IT in the Bay. Thanks for being here, Chris. Chris Marshall, everybody. See you later.
IT in the Bay. IT in the Bay.
In the Bay.
IT in the Bay. IT in the Bay.
In the Bay.
IT in the Bay. IT in the Bay.
In the Bay.
In the Bay. Bay.
Bay.